You think you can humiliate me? I whispered to myself as rain-slicked streets reflected the neon glow of the city like shattered glass. Emily Carter tightened her grip on the worn strap of her messenger bag, feeling the cold bite of March air through the thin fabric of her jacket as she hurried past the empty storefronts. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement in rapid, uneven bursts, each echo matching the racing of her heart. She had just left the gym, cheeks flushed from exertion, and her phone buzzed relentlessly with the latest taunt from her ex, his words dripping with mockery, "You got fat." She froze mid-step, the sting of his text sharper than any physical strike, and pressed the phone to her chest as if it could shield her from humiliation. Her hand trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline of embarrassment and fatigue, and she exhaled shakily, trying to push the negative thoughts away. That's when she noticed the sleek black SUV parked in the shadow of the streetlight, its polished surface reflecting the rain like liquid obsidian. The door opened slowly, and Jason Malone stepped out, tall and imposing, wearing a tailored dark coat that clung to his frame. The wet streets mirrored the glint of his shoes as he moved with a calm, controlled power that made Emily instinctively step back, heart pounding. His icy blue eyes scanned her with an intensity that was impossible to ignore, and the faint scent of expensive cologne mingled with the petrichor in the air. He didn't speak at first, he just observed, and she felt as if every misstep, every flinch, every thought she tried to hide was laid bare under his scrutiny. Emily's mind raced, realizing that this wasn't chance, he had chosen to appear here, in this moment, and the weight of that presence made her shiver. She tried to force a smile, a weak shield against his gaze, but Jason's expression softened fractionally when he saw her wince at the sting of the text, the tension in her posture. Without a word, he moved closer, hand subtly brushing her arm to steady her as her heel caught on a slick patch of asphalt. The touch was firm, protective, and for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, though her pulse raced with a mix of fear and curiosity. Emily glanced down at her rounded stomach, the secret she had been guarding, and felt a surge of vulnerability. Jason's gaze flicked there just once, a subtle acknowledgement of what she had not yet shared with the world, but his eyes were kind, not judgmental. The distant sound of a car horn snapped her back to reality, and she instinctively stepped aside to let it pass, her bag swinging, water droplets sliding down her hair. Jason remained at her side, a silent sentinel, letting her feel the unusual comfort of someone's protective attention in a world that had been harsh and unrelenting. She realized, in that instant, that this moment, so ordinary on the surface, yet charged with an unspoken promise, was the beginning of something that would change everything. The rain continued to fall, pattering against the asphalt in irregular rhythms, mirroring the racing of her heart as she turned to meet Jason's gaze, a question unspoken hanging in the mist between them, and for the first time since the cruel message from her ex, Emily felt that she wasn't entirely alone in facing the storm. Emily took a tentative step toward her apartment building, the rain still dripping from the edges of her coat, soaking the hem of her skirt and weighing down her messenger bag. The city felt quieter now, the distant hum of traffic softened by the steady drizzle. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting the laughter or ridicule of her ex to echo across the empty street, but there was only the muted glow of street lamps and the occasional flash of headlights. Jason Malone walked a step behind her, his presence calm yet commanding, his polished shoes making soft splashes in the puddles as he matched her pace without a word. Emily's mind raced with questions she did not dare to speak aloud, thoughts about the baby she carried, and the way the world had shifted without warning the moment she realized her ex's cruelty had collided with circumstances beyond anyone's knowledge. She fumbled with her keys, fumbling with a nervousness she had not felt in years, and Jason waited patiently, his gloved hand resting lightly against the doorframe as if offering silent reassurance. The moment her key clicked into the lock, a sense of relief washed over her, though it was tempered by the lingering tension in her shoulders and the racing of her pulse. Once inside, she set down her bag and removed her jacket, hanging it over a chair while the water slid off her damp hair and pooled silently on the hardwood floor. Jason remained near the entrance, his eyes scanning the small apartment with a careful precision that suggested he noticed every detail, from the scattered textbooks on the sofa to the half-empty coffee cup perched precariously on the counter. Emily's breathing began to steady as she moved toward the kitchen, reaching for a glass of water, and for the first time since the rain had begun, she allowed herself a quiet exhale, a moment of reprieve in the midst of uncertainty. Jason's gaze followed her, calm yet vigilant, and the subtle shift in his posture conveyed a sense of quiet protection that was both unexpected and grounding. Emily took a sip of water, feeling the cool liquid soothe the dryness in her throat, and allowed herself to glance back at him, noticing the way his eyes softened briefly as they met hers, a silent acknowledgement of shared understanding without the need for words. The apartment was small, the furniture modest, yet the space seemed heavier with the presence of someone who carried authority effortlessly, someone who could observe and understand without intruding. Emily placed her glass down and rubbed her palms against her skirt, steadying herself, and Jason moved a step closer, the sound of his movement quiet against the wooden floor, and she realized she was no longer alone in facing the tension of the evening, the unspoken threat of her ex, or the weight of the secret she carried. The rain outside continued its steady fall, tapping against the windows with a rhythmic insistence, echoing the rapid beat of her heart, and Emily allowed herself to sit on the edge of the sofa, letting her legs stretch as she absorbed the presence of someone whose silent vigilance promised a safeguard she had not known she needed, someone whose authority and calmness could shield her from the chaos of the world outside, even if just for a moment, while the reality of the unborn life she protected remained at the center of her thoughts. Emily sank further into the sofa cushions, wrapping her arms around her knees as the city lights outside blurred through the rain-streaked windows. Her thoughts spun with the events of the evening, the text from her ex echoing cruelly in her mind, and yet the presence of Jason Malone beside her created an unexpected tension that was both alarming and oddly comforting. The hum of the refrigerator, the drip of water from the windowsill, and the occasional car passing in the distance filled the apartment with mundane sounds that contrasted sharply with the intensity of the moment. Jason did not speak, only observed, his posture relaxed but alert, as if he could sense every emotion running through her body. Emily ran a hand through her damp hair, feeling the pull of exhaustion and the constant awareness of the life growing inside her. She had always been independent, relied on herself, and the idea of needing someone, of letting him see the parts of her she had hidden even from her closest friends, created a fluttering anxiety that she could not quiet. Jason shifted slightly, a subtle movement that made her glance up, and his gaze met hers with an unwavering focus that seemed to see beyond the exterior, beyond the fear, into the core of who she was. She swallowed, taking a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction as she realized he was not demanding, not imposing, simply present, a sentinel in the quiet night. The rain intensified outside, tapping against the windows in irregular rhythms, and Emily let herself lean back, resting against the sofa, feeling the warmth of the apartment slowly seeping into her chilled limbs. Her phone vibrated again, a reminder of the messages she had ignored, and she glanced at it briefly, deciding against opening it. Jason's eyes followed her movement, not judgmental, only attentive, and she felt a surge of gratitude mixed with a hint of disbelief that someone could hold that space for her without complicating it with expectations or demands. The thought of the baby, of the secret she carried, pressed gently against her consciousness, and she realized she was not alone in safeguarding it. Jason rose slightly, moving to the kitchen counter, pouring 2 glasses of water, and handing one to her without a word, the gesture simple yet laden with consideration. Emily accepted it, the glass cool in her hand, and allowed herself a small, grateful smile. She sipped slowly, the taste of water grounding her, and glanced at him, noting the subtle way he relaxed into the space, the faint shadow of a protective presence that seemed to fill the room without intrusion. Time stretched in the quiet apartment, moments passing in a slow rhythm punctuated by the rain outside, and Emily felt a flicker of something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time, the fragile comfort of trust, the sense that perhaps she could navigate the storms of life without facing them entirely alone. Jason moved back slightly, giving her space, yet remaining within the radius of his presence, and she realized that the tension she had carried, the constant vigilance against cruelty and chaos, had softened just enough to allow a quiet reflection, a momentary reprieve in which she could plan, breathe, and prepare for what the next day might bring, knowing that someone capable, aware, and unwavering was there beside her, silently vowing to shield her from the uncertainties and challenges that awaited beyond the walls of this small apartment. The next morning, Emily awoke to the soft gray light filtering through the blinds, the rain having softened to a gentle drizzle that tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm. Her apartment smelled faintly of the coffee she had left brewing the night before, a small comfort in the quiet, lingering tension of the previous evening. She stretched, feeling the subtle movements of the baby within her, a gentle reminder of the life she carried and the stakes that had suddenly become real in ways she had never anticipated. Jason Malone had stayed until she had settled in, his presence a quiet anchor, and even though he had departed before dawn, the memory of his watchful eyes and steady demeanor lingered, wrapping around her like a protective shield. She moved through the apartment, gathering her notes for the day, her mind rehearsing the tasks she needed to accomplish while maintaining the careful balance of secrecy and normalcy that had become her routine. As she sorted through the scattered papers on her kitchen table, her phone vibrated, a subtle yet insistent alert. She hesitated before unlocking it, half expecting another message from her ex, the thought tightening her chest. Instead, it was a notification from the clinic, confirming her morning appointments, and a small smile touched her lips. She felt the flutter of anticipation and anxiety simultaneously, knowing that every step she took was observed, every decision mattered more than ever before. The doorbell chimed softly, startling her, and she crossed the room, the plush carpet muffling her steps as she reached for the intercom. A familiar voice, calm and precise, greeted her, letting her know it was Jason checking in. She allowed herself a quiet exhale, the sense of relief mingling with a cautious awareness of his presence. Emily answered, her voice steady despite the racing in her chest, and the conversation was brief yet grounding, his words a mixture of reassurance and gentle caution that reminded her she was not alone in navigating the complexities of her life. After hanging up, she prepared for her day, moving efficiently through the apartment, noting the small details that had once seemed insignificant but now carried weight, the placement of her keys, the organization of her files, the careful arrangement of her belongings to ensure she could move swiftly and confidently if needed. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the streets slick and reflective, and she paused at the window, watching the city begin to stir with morning activity. Cars glided over wet pavement, pedestrians hurried with umbrellas, and the familiar skyline seemed to hold a promise of both opportunity and challenge. Emily felt the mix of emotions settle into a focused determination, the knowledge that she had someone in her corner, someone who understood the stakes without judgment, infusing her with a quiet strength. She moved to the bedroom, changing into her work attire, taking a moment to smooth her hair and adjust her coat, mindful of how the day would unfold. With each movement, she rehearsed the steps she would take, anticipating the challenges, planning for the unexpected, and acknowledging the presence of Jason's silent support. As she left her apartment, stepping onto the glistening sidewalks, she felt the subtle weight of anticipation and vigilance, her mind attuned to the environment, aware of the world around her and the hidden layers of protection and intent that had entered her life. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain-soaked asphalt and fresh beginnings, and Emily walked with measured steps, each one a quiet assertion of her resilience and readiness to face whatever the day might bring, secure in the knowledge that she was watched over, guided, and never truly alone. Emily stepped onto the busy sidewalk, the morning sun breaking through scattered clouds and casting long reflections on the wet pavement. Her heart still thumped from the brisk walk from her apartment to the clinic, a mix of anticipation and careful caution in every step. The city moved around her in its usual rhythm, the sounds of delivery trucks, honking cars, and distant conversations blending into a backdrop she had long grown accustomed to. She adjusted the strap of her bag, feeling the subtle weight of her notes and supplies, the physical reminder of her responsibilities and the life she carried inside her. As she approached the clinic entrance, she caught a glimpse of the familiar black SUV parked unobtrusively across the street. Jason Malone remained a silent guardian, his figure partially hidden behind the tinted windows, observing without intrusion. She allowed herself a small exhale, a moment of reassurance that she was not entirely alone in navigating the challenges that lay ahead. Inside, the waiting room was quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional rustle of papers the only disturbances in the calm. Emily moved to her workstation, arranging the files and equipment with careful precision, each motion deliberate and mindful, aware that the slightest lapse could lead to unnecessary stress or exposure. The first patient arrived, a small child accompanied by a nervous parent, and Emily's focus shifted entirely to her work, her hands moving confidently as she guided the child through assessments, noting every subtle reaction and movement. Despite the busyness of the clinic, her mind occasionally flicked to Jason, the presence of his vigilance lending her an unexpected sense of security. She felt the connection, not through words, but through the unspoken acknowledgement that someone capable and reliable was watching over her, ready to intervene if needed. The morning passed in a rhythm of appointments, each patient receiving her full attention, yet Emily remained conscious of the external world and the subtle movements across the street, knowing that Jason observed her routines without judgment or interference. During a brief break, she stepped to the window, watching the city streets glisten under the wet remnants of the morning drizzle, feeling the quiet reassurance of his presence as a protective constant. Her thoughts wandered to the baby, the future, and the delicate balance she now maintained between independence and the unexpected support that Jason provided. She took a slow breath, allowing herself a moment of reflection, considering the intricate network of responsibility, trust, and cautious hope that defined her day. The rain clouds dissipated further, revealing patches of blue sky and sunlight dancing across the glass buildings, the city alive with possibility and challenge. Emily returned to her work, each task imbued with heightened awareness, a mindfulness born of necessity, yet tempered with the quiet comfort of knowing that beyond the doors, beyond the routines and the city's hum, someone watched over her with an unwavering calm and measured authority, ready to intervene silently, protectively, and without fanfare, creating a sense of safety and reassurance that allowed her to navigate the complexities of her life with newfound resilience and focus. By mid-afternoon, Emily felt the subtle fatigue of a long day settling into her shoulders, a gentle reminder of the hours she had spent managing patients and keeping her attention split between careful observation and efficient workflow. She leaned against the countertop for a moment, glancing out the large window at the city streets glistening with the last remnants of the rain, the sunlight catching puddles and reflecting shards of blue and gray across the sidewalk. Jason Malone had remained nearby, seated in a quiet corner of the waiting area, his presence unobtrusive yet unmistakable, a steady anchor in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. Emily noticed the way he watched, not with scrutiny, but with a composed awareness that suggested he understood more than she could articulate, a subtle acknowledgement of the challenges she navigated each day. A young boy entered the clinic with his mother, and Emily moved to greet them, her hands confident and sure as she guided him through a routine check, taking note of his reactions and maintaining a calm, reassuring voice. Jason shifted slightly, just enough for her to notice the silent communication in his posture, a reassurance that he was aware but would not intervene unnecessarily, allowing her to maintain control and autonomy while still knowing someone capable was close by. The afternoon sunlight shifted, casting long, warm streaks across the clinic floor, and Emily felt a rare sense of quiet triumph as her tasks proceeded without incident, each patient attended to with precision and care. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, the hum of the air conditioning and the soft murmur of the waiting area serving as a comforting backdrop. Emily moved toward the small kitchenette to pour herself a glass of water, her movements fluid and measured, aware of the life growing within her and the responsibility that accompanied it. Jason rose to refill his own glass, the subtle gesture reinforcing a sense of partnership that required no words, no explicit promises, simply shared understanding and presence. She sipped her water and felt the cool liquid slide down her throat, a grounding sensation that countered the constant swirl of thoughts in her mind. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, cars gliding past, pedestrians walking with purpose, the distant sound of construction and conversation blending into an almost musical backdrop to the quiet intensity within the clinic. Emily reflected briefly on the unfolding events, the security and guidance Jason provided, and the knowledge that she was seen, protected, and respected in a way that allowed her to navigate her day with greater assurance. Each patient she attended to, each conversation she managed, was infused with her full attention, yet she remained conscious of the broader context, the intricate balance between independence and the subtle, unspoken guardianship Jason offered. As the afternoon waned, she gathered her belongings, prepared for the journey home, and felt the quiet reassurance of a protective presence accompanying her without constraint, a steadfast companion through the ordinary and extraordinary moments alike, lending her strength and confidence with every measured step she took toward the city streets outside. As evening descended, the city took on a softer hue, the streetlights casting long golden reflections on the wet pavement, glimmering like a river of light that stretched endlessly into the distance. Emily Carter paused at the corner, the subtle weight of her coat pressing against her growing belly, the cool evening breeze carrying the scent of rain and asphalt. Her hands lingered on the strap of her bag, fingers brushing the leather as she took in the rhythmic sounds of the streets, the occasional distant laughter and the hum of engines blending into the symphony of urban life. Across the street, the familiar black SUV waited silently, Jason Malone seated within, eyes scanning the streets with a quiet intensity that suggested he was both aware and patient, letting the city move around him while he remained a sentinel. Emily felt the calm assurance of his presence, the unspoken understanding that she was not alone in navigating the subtle threats and challenges that life presented. She moved forward, each step measured, mindful of puddles and slick spots, her mind processing the events of the day and the careful balance she maintained between her independence and the protective influence that Jason provided. As she reached the entrance to her apartment building, her keys clutched tightly in one hand, the other hand resting gently on her belly, she sensed the briefest shift in the air, a subtle awareness that someone's focus was unwavering. Jason stepped out of the vehicle as she entered the lobby, the polished leather of his shoes silent on the floor, the tailored lines of his coat precise and authoritative. Emily allowed herself a small smile, the first of the day that felt entirely hers, not forced, not a response to external pressures, but a recognition of shared understanding. He did not speak, merely followed a step behind as she ascended the stairs to her apartment, the gentle echo of their movements filling the stairwell with a quiet rhythm that was strangely comforting. Inside, she placed her bag down and moved to the window, watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky, the distant sounds of traffic and pedestrians blending into a muted soundtrack for reflection. Jason remained at a respectful distance, yet close enough that the sense of protection he provided was tangible, a quiet presence that allowed her to breathe, to think, to exist without constant vigilance. Emily ran a hand along the edge of the windowsill, feeling the cool surface, and allowed her thoughts to drift to the life she carried, the fragile yet growing certainty of the future, and the quiet knowledge that she had an ally, someone whose awareness and consideration extended beyond mere observation. The evening stretched on, the city gradually quieting as night deepened, and Emily felt a sense of reassurance that had been absent for far too long, a measured comfort that allowed her to plan, reflect, and simply exist in the space she inhabited, knowing that Jason Malone's silent guardianship was both unwavering and unobtrusive, a steadfast presence in the unpredictable flow of life outside the walls of her apartment. The next morning, Emily woke to the gentle sound of sunlight streaming through the blinds, casting a warm glow across her apartment. The city outside was beginning to stir, cars humming along wet streets and distant footsteps echoing faintly against the concrete sidewalks. She stretched slowly, feeling the soft movement of the baby within her, a quiet reminder of the responsibility and hope she carried. Her thoughts drifted to the previous evening, to the quiet presence of Jason Malone, whose watchful eyes and calm authority had become a stabilizing force in her life. As she moved through her apartment, preparing for the day, she noticed small details she had not before, the arrangement of the furniture, the neat stack of papers on the counter, the way sunlight danced across the floorboards. She took a deep breath, centering herself, feeling a mixture of anticipation and gratitude, knowing that Jason's protective vigilance extended beyond mere observation, offering her a sense of security without constraint. When she stepped outside, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly fallen rain and the faint aroma of street cafes opening for the morning. Jason was already waiting nearby, his figure partially obscured by the shadow of a building, yet unmistakably present. Emily allowed herself a small, reassuring smile, feeling the subtle weight of his attention, a quiet reminder that she was not alone in navigating the intricacies of her day. They walked together, a measured distance apart, the city alive around them with the rhythm of routine life and the soft patter of occasional raindrops still clinging to rooftops. Emily's mind moved between her responsibilities and the awareness of her surroundings, noting the care in every gesture, every movement, and appreciating the unspoken communication between them. Jason's gaze followed her, attentive but not imposing, allowing her to move with autonomy while providing a quiet sense of reassurance that only heightened her confidence. As they reached the entrance to the clinic, Emily felt a surge of determination, a readiness to face the challenges of the day while carrying the hidden significance of her pregnancy. Jason lingered at the edge of the doorway, offering a protective presence without words, and she entered with a calm resolve, aware that the trust and vigilance he offered allowed her to act with a steadiness she had not felt before. Throughout the morning, as patients arrived and she attended to their needs, Emily maintained her focus, her hands steady and her mind clear, yet always conscious of the watchful presence nearby. The subtle interplay between her independence and the quiet guardianship created a rhythm that balanced tension with reassurance, fear with strength. By midday, the sun had fully broken through the clouds, casting a warm light across the clinic, and Emily allowed herself a brief moment to reflect, feeling the weight of her experiences tempered by the calm, protective presence of Jason Malone, a silent partner in her life whose unwavering attention and careful consideration gave her the confidence to continue, to plan, and to face the world beyond the clinic doors with renewed assurance and quiet fortitude. As twilight settled over the city, Emily Carter felt a calm resolve as she moved through her apartment, the golden light of the setting sun reflecting off the windows and casting long, warm shadows across the floor. She paused to take a deep breath, placing a hand gently on her belly and feeling the subtle, reassuring movements of the baby within her. The day had been long, filled with the quiet intensity of her work at the clinic and the careful navigation of her interactions, yet the presence of Jason Malone, even when not in direct sight, had provided a steady undercurrent of reassurance throughout. She walked to the window and gazed at the streets below, watching the interplay of car lights, pedestrians, and the occasional cyclist moving swiftly through the evening glow. Her thoughts wandered to the complexities of her life, the secret she carried, and the subtle ways in which Jason's vigilance had made even the most ordinary moments feel protected, safe, and under careful consideration. The hum of the city, distant and continuous, blended with the soft rustle of her apartment, and Emily allowed herself a rare moment to pause, to simply exist within a space that felt both personal and guarded. She moved to the small kitchen to prepare a cup of tea, the aroma rising and filling the room with a gentle comfort that contrasted the briskness of the streets below. Jason appeared in the doorway, as silent and composed as ever, the fading sunlight outlining the sharp lines of his tailored coat and the calm authority of his posture. Emily offered a tentative smile, a gesture returned with a subtle nod that conveyed understanding, reassurance, and the quiet acknowledgement of shared purpose. They moved through the evening in companionable silence, the unspoken bond between them reinforced by small gestures, the careful arrangement of their surroundings, and the mutual awareness of responsibility and vigilance. Emily settled on the sofa, sipping her tea and allowing the warmth to settle in her chest, feeling the gentle movement of her unborn child as